Ethan had been on the trail since early morning, and by late afternoon his shirt clung to his back from heat and dust. The sun was lowering behind the distant ridge, turning the sky orange and soft gold. He was thinking only about reaching his small cabin before dark, feeding his horse, and finally resting his tired legs. The day had been long, filled with checking stray cattle, tightening loose fence posts, and following tracks that led nowhere important. It was the kind of work that made a man want a quiet evening. But as he rounded a bend in the trail, the peaceful thought slipped away. There, off the side of the path, stood a wagon that clearly should not have been there. It was tilted hard to one side. One wheel cracked and sunk deep in the dirt. A single figure knelt beside it, struggling with something heavy. Ethan pulled on his reins gently, slowing his horse to a careful stop. The figure looked up. Even from a distance, Ethan could see she wasn't a traveler he recognized. Her clothing, her braids, and the beaded tie in her hair all told him she was Apache. She didn't wave him over, didn't call for help. She simply watched him, silent and still, as if waiting to see his next move. Ethan understood her caution. Most people in the territory kept their distance from each other, even when help was needed. But Ethan wasn't the type to ride past someone stuck on the trail. No matter who they were, he eased down from his horse, keeping his hands visible so she wouldn't think he meant trouble. The dirt crunched softly under his boots as he walked forward. He stopped several steps away to show respect. He didn't want to crowd her or make her feel cornered. She straightened slowly, her eyes sharp, her hands steady. Ethan lifted his palms in a peaceful sign. "I don't mean any harm," he said gently. "Just saw your wagon broken there. If you want help, I can try." The woman held his gaze for a long moment. Her expression didn't soften, but she didn't turn away either. Ethan waited, letting her make the choice. Finally, she gave one small nod. Not a big one, not warm, but clear enough. Ethan stepped closer, still moving slow so she knew he wasn't rushing. Up close, he could see the problem clearly. The wagon wheel had hit a hidden rock and cracked the axle. The wood was split and leaning, the whole wagon tilted like it might collapse with one wrong push. He crouched down beside the wheel, turning it gently and testing how much weight it could take. The woman knelt too, keeping a little distance, but watching attentively. She motioned toward the crack and spoke in soft English. "It broke yesterday. I tried fixing, but no tools." Ethan nodded. She didn't sound ashamed, just tired. Anyone would be tired after trying to lift a wagon by themselves. He took off his saddlebag and searched through it. He found a handful of small wooden shims he often carried for mending fence rails, some rope, and a short iron pin. It wasn't everything he wished he had, but he could make it work. He began explaining what he was doing so she wouldn't feel confused or alarmed. "If we lift it a little, I can place these pieces in and keep it steady. It won't be perfect, but enough to move." She listened silently, then helped him lift the side of the wagon. They didn't speak much, but something unspoken passed between them, a simple trust created by shared effort. Though small in frame, she was strong, steady, and knew how to balance the weight without making the wagon tip further. Working together, they fitted the shims and bound the cracked wood with the rope so it would hold. It took longer than Ethan expected, because he wanted to make sure it wouldn't fall apart halfway down the trail. The woman wiped her forehead once but kept going without complaint. Ethan admired her determination quietly, though he didn't say it aloud. When the last piece was in place, Ethan stepped back to test the repair. The wheel wobbled slightly but stayed straight. For a temporary fix on an open trail, it was about as good as anyone could manage. The woman stepped around the wagon and looked at the wheel as if she almost didn't believe it could stand again. Her dark eyes lifted to Ethan. Holding something between surprise and confusion, she touched her hand lightly to her chest. "My name is Tassa," she said. Ethan nodded politely. I'm Ethan." She looked at him for a moment longer, then spoke softly. "You helped me without asking anything." "Someone needed help," he replied simply. "That's enough." Tassa didn't respond right away. It seemed like the idea of a stranger helping freely was not something she experienced often. She walked a few steps, breathing out slowly, as if letting go of worry she had carried since the wheel broke. Ethan wasn't the type to linger. He checked the wagon one more time, and then walked with her for a short distance, to make sure the wheel rolled properly. When it did, he gave her a small canvas bag of food, dried fruit, biscuits, and a bit of jerky. Nothing fancy. But it was what he had. She hesitated before taking it. Not because she didn't want it, but because she wasn't used to someone offering something without expecting anything back. After a pause, she accepted the bag with both hands and whispered her thanks. Ethan tipped his hat lightly. "Safe travels," he said, already stepping toward his horse. Tassa watched him mount up and ride away. Ethan didn't look back, because he didn't expect her to stay. He figured by the time he reached his cabin, she'd be far down the trail, on her way to wherever she needed to go. He didn't think their paths would cross again. To him, it had been a simple act, a good deed done on a dusty evening. When Ethan reached his cabin, he unsaddled his horse, brushed him down, and placed fresh hay in the trough. The sky deepened into shades of blue and purple as night crept in. Ethan sat on the porch for a while, letting the quiet settle around him. He thought a little about Tassa, not her story, not her past, just the look on her face when the wagon finally stood straight again. He hoped she reached her home or camp safely. After that, he let the day drift away. Early the next morning, Ethan stepped outside with a tin cup of warm coffee. The air was crisp, carrying the faint smell of pine from the nearby ridge. Routine guided his steps. He had not a single worry in his mind. But then he froze. His cabin, his yard, even the dirt path leading out, all of it was surrounded. Riders on horseback stood in a perfect circle around his land. Their horses were tall and quiet. Their faces were painted with deep red and black markings. They weren't shouting. They weren't moving. They simply watched him. Ethan slowly put the cup down on the porch rail. The air around him felt suddenly heavy. Not dangerous, but serious. He counted at least 12 riders. Maybe more behind the trees. Every single one of them sat tall, steady, controlled. Ethan's heartbeat thumped once, hard, and then steadied. He understood immediately. He didn't know why they had come, or what they wanted. But he knew exactly who they were connected to. He had helped an Apache woman fix her wagon. And now Apache warriors had ringed his cabin in silence. Ethan stood on the porch with the morning light spreading across the valley. Yet nothing felt like a normal morning. The circle of riders around his cabin did not shift, did not speak, did not break formation. They sat on their horses like statues carved from the early light. Ethan didn't feel fear, but he felt something else, something heavy and important, something that told him he should move slowly and think carefully. The wind was steady and quiet. The horses twitched their ears at small insects, but the riders themselves didn't move at all. Their faces were marked with the same patterns, red across the cheeks, black across the forehead, lines that meant something he did not understand. Ethan swallowed, not out of panic, but out of the strange realization that this moment had arrived because of something simple he had done the day before. He took one careful step down the porch. The riders didn't reach for anything, didn't react. They simply watched him. Ethan raised his hands slightly, palms open. The same peaceful gesture he had shown Tassa when he first approached her broken wagon. He cleared his throat gently. "Morning," he said, because he had no other way to begin. For a while, there was nothing. Ethan wondered if they expected him to speak again, or if they were communicating with each other silently. Then, one of the riders nudged his horse forward. The movement was slow and controlled, the kind that came from someone used to leading without force. He looked older than the others, his hair streaked with gray, his expression calm but serious. The rider stopped only a few steps from Ethan's porch. Ethan remained still. The man looked at him with eyes that said he was measuring more than Ethan's words, maybe his actions, his character, or even his intentions. "You helped someone yesterday," the rider said in steady English. His voice carried a tone of respect mixed with caution. Ethan nodded once. "I helped a woman with her wagon," he answered plainly. She needed it. The older rider watched him closely. It wasn't suspicion, but something deeper, like he was trying to understand why Ethan had done what he did. You did not know who she was, the rider said. No, sir, Ethan replied. I didn't ask. I just saw someone stuck. The rider's expression didn't soften, but his eyes shifted, almost thoughtful. Her name is Tassa. She is from our people. You repaired her wheel, and you gave her food. I had extra, Ethan said honestly. It wasn't much. You gave her kindness, the rider corrected gently. Ethan didn't know what to say to that. In his mind, he had just done what felt right. He didn't think it was kindness. He didn't think it was special. It was just something a decent person would do. But hearing the rider speak made him realize maybe Tassa wasn't used to receiving that from strangers. The older rider finally nodded. Then he motioned with his hand, and some of the riders around the cabin shifted slightly, opening a path between them. From the break in the circle, a small group approached. Among them was Tassa. She stepped forward quietly, her steps light, her posture calm but uncertain. She looked different today. Her hair was neater, her clothing cleaner, and there was a certain steadiness in her walk, like she felt safer now that she was with her people. But there was also something in her eyes, something tired, like she hadn't slept much. When she reached the front, she stood beside the older rider and looked at Ethan. Her expression was serious, not fearful, but it held a depth Ethan hadn't seen the day before. This is the man, she said softly, speaking to the riders behind her. He helped me. The older rider nodded. We know. Tassa took a slow breath, then looked directly at Ethan. I told them, she said quietly. Ethan didn't ask what she had told them. He simply waited. Tassa continued, her voice steady but emotional in a way she tried to hide. I told them, you did not ask anything of me. You did not ask who I was. You did not demand anything in return. You only helped. Ethan didn't interrupt. He let her speak. Tassa glanced back at her people, then again at him. My family was worried, she said. They thought something happened to me. When they found me late, I told them why I was safe. I told them why I was safe. The older rider stepped forward again, his gaze firm. I am her uncle, he said. Her parents are no longer living. She travels often, sometimes too far. When she did not return last night, we searched. Ethan nodded with understanding. The uncle continued. When she told us what happened, we came. We wanted to see the man who helped her. The man she trusted. Ethan exhaled softly. I didn't think much of it, he said honestly. I just didn't want to leave someone stranded. The uncle studied him a long moment. Many men would have left her, he said. Many men have. Ethan didn't argue. He knew it was true. For the first time, some of the riders around the cabin eased their posture. They weren't relaxed, but they weren't rigid anymore either. They seemed to understand now that Ethan wasn't trying to hide anything. Tassa stepped forward a little more. The movement was small but brave. My uncle wanted to speak with you, she said quietly. He wanted to see your face. Ethan raised an eyebrow slightly. My face? Yes. The uncle replied with a faint, serious smile. A person's face tells more than their words. And yours showed what we needed to see. Ethan didn't know what that meant exactly, but he nodded politely. The uncle's horse shifted its weight, and he straightened, as if making a decision. You offered help freely. That is something we do not forget easily. Ethan didn't know what to say, so he simply gave a small shrug. It was the right thing. The uncle exchanged a look with Tassa. She gave him a tiny nod. Then he looked back at Ethan. We came not for anger, the uncle said slowly, but for gratitude. Ethan blinked. He hadn't expected that. The uncle gestured, and one of the riders brought forward a small bundle wrapped in deerskin. The rider dismounted and placed the bundle gently on Ethan's porch. Ethan didn't open it. He just watched silently. "This is a gift," the uncle said. "A sign of thanks." Ethan felt a bit uncomfortable. He wasn't used to receiving gifts for doing what felt like common sense. "I don't need anything in return," he said softly. "But we need to give," the uncle replied. "That is our way." Tassa looked at Ethan with a softness that hadn't been there before. "When someone helps with a true heart," she said, "we honor them." The riders around the cabin finally relaxed, loosening their formation. A few even looked less stern. The morning sun brightened the clearing, making everything feel warmer. But before Ethan could speak again, the uncle raised one finger. His expression grew serious once more. "There is one more thing," he said quietly. Ethan waited. "Tassa travels again today," the uncle continued, "but not alone. She will pass through land that may not be safe. We want to ask something of you." Ethan didn't speak yet, letting him finish. "We want you to ride part of the way with her, only a short distance, only until she reaches safer ground." Tassa lowered her eyes slightly, not embarrassed but thoughtful. Ethan understood the request instantly. It wasn't a command. It wasn't pressure. It was a respectful request from people who simply wanted someone they trusted to accompany someone they cared about. Ethan gave one small nod. "If that's what you need," he said gently, "I'll do it." The uncle breathed out calmly and nodded back. Tassa looked at Ethan with quiet gratitude. Her eyes softened, holding a warm respect that hadn't been there the day before. She didn't smile, but something in her gaze felt like a thank you all on its own. And though Ethan didn't know it yet, that single nod agreeing to ride with her would change much more than one morning's plans. Ethan saddled his horse with steady hands, while the Apache riders slowly reshaped their circle. They weren't surrounding the cabin anymore. Instead, they stood in loose clusters, speaking quietly among themselves while keeping an eye on Tassa. The early sun lit the valley in soft gold, turning the hills warm and peaceful, but the moment still carried weight. Ethan could feel it in the air, the kind of weight that came from responsibility, trust, and the unexpected turn of a simple act of kindness. Tassa stood off to the side, speaking with her uncle in low tones. Ethan didn't try to listen. Whatever they discussed was family business, and he respected that. She looked calm but thoughtful, as if preparing herself for something important. Every now and then she glanced at Ethan, not out of worry but perhaps reassurance that he truly meant to accompany her. When Ethan finished saddling his horse, he leaned on the saddle for a moment, taking a slow breath. He had helped many people in his life, but he had never been asked to ride alongside someone from a tribe that often kept its distance from ranchers and settlers. He wasn't worried, just aware that this day was turning into something he hadn't expected when he woke. Tassa walked toward him, her steps light across the dirt. Ethan straightened as she approached. She stopped a few feet away, not too close, maintaining respectful space. "My uncle says thank you again," she said softly. "You already thanked me yesterday," Ethan replied with a gentle smile. "But I appreciate it." Tassa's eyes lifted. They were dark, steady, and curious. "He says you are a man who does not hide his heart." Ethan wasn't sure how to respond. "I'm just a man who fixed a wagon." Tassa shook her head slightly. "Many can fix something with their hands. Fewer can fix something with their actions." "Toss." Ethan didn't argue with her. Instead, he checked the cinch on his saddle again, making sure it was tight. Tassa adjusted the small pack tied to her waist. It looked lighter today, as if she had left unnecessary burdens behind. When they were both ready, her uncle approached on horseback. His presence was calm, carrying a quiet authority that didn't need shouting or force. He looked at Ethan, as if measuring him one last time. "You ride with her until the big cedar tree near the ridge," he said. Ethan nodded. "I'll see her through." Tassa's uncle looked satisfied. Then he leaned slightly toward her. "Go carefully, Tassa. Do not wander from the trail." "I won't," she promised. The riders parted, opening a space for the two of them to leave. Ethan mounted his horse, and Tassa climbed onto hers with practiced ease. For a moment, they sat side by side, both waiting to make sure the other was ready. Then, they began the journey. The valley stretched quiet before them. The sound of hooves pressing into soft earth echoed gently as they moved across open land. The Apache riders stayed behind, watching until the two were a good distance away. Ethan didn't look back, but he knew they remained there until Tassa was safely out of their sight. The morning wind carried the smell of sagebrush and wild grass. Tassa rode slightly ahead at first, guiding the way with confidence. Ethan followed close enough to keep her in view, but far enough that she didn't feel crowded. It wasn't awkward, more like a peaceful silence shared between two people who didn't need to fill every minute with words. After a while, Tassa slowed her horse until she rode beside him. She glanced at him briefly. "You ride quietly," she said. Ethan chuckled. "I'm used to long days alone." She nodded as if that answer made perfect sense. "I am also used to silence," she said. "It lets the land speak." Her words hung softly in the air. Ethan didn't know exactly what she meant, but something about it felt true. The land around them did feel like it had its own quiet voice. They crossed low grasslands, weaving gently between scattered rocks. Birds drifted overhead, their wings brushing the sky in wide circles. Sometimes Tassa would look toward the horizon, studying shapes and shadows only she understood. Ethan noticed the way she guided her horse, not forcefully but with ease, like she trusted the animal and it trusted her. After nearly an hour of riding, Tassa finally spoke again. "My uncle. He worries too much." "Uncles tend to do that," Ethan replied. "Family does." Tassa gave a small smile, her first of the morning. "He thinks I wander too far. He thinks I look for trouble." Ethan glanced at her. "Were you looking for trouble yesterday?" "No," she said simply. "I was looking for herbs near the creek. But I walked too far." She hesitated, then added softly, "I do that sometimes." Ethan nodded. "Happens to all of us." Tassa looked thoughtful for a moment. "When the wheel broke, I thought I would be there all night. I waited, and no one came. Then you did." Ethan shrugged gently. "Anyone would have helped." Tassa tilted her head slightly, almost skeptical. "Not anyone," she replied. "Some people look away when they see someone different." Ethan didn't deny it. He knew she was right. They continued riding, falling into a calm rhythm. The sun climbed higher, warming their backs. The path ahead narrow and curved, winding gently toward the ridge where the big cedar tree stood. After some time, Tassa spoke again, her voice quieter. "May I ask something?" "Sure. When you saw me yesterday, were you afraid?" Ethan shook his head. "No, I wasn't." "You thought I was alone?" "I figured you needed help. That was enough." Tassa looked down at her hands on the reins. "It surprised me. Most people only see the paint, the clothes, the tribe. They don't see the person." "I saw someone tired," Ethan said. "And someone trying to fix a wagon that shouldn't be lifted alone." Tassa's shoulders eased at his words. Not because she expected praise, but because she understood he spoke honestly. They reached a small hill, and as their horses climbed it, the view opened wide. From the top, Ethan could see the path stretching far below, dust shimmering like pale silver. A hawk circled above them before drifting toward the ridge. Tassa pointed ahead. "Do you see that tall shape?" "That is the big cedar," Ethan nodded. "Not far now." But neither of them hurried. The quiet between them had grown comfortable. Not heavy, not awkward, just peaceful. As they rode, Tassa began speaking softly, as if sharing something she had kept inside. "When I told my uncle about you," she said, "he did not believe me at first. He said no rancher helps without wanting something." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "What changed his mind?" "I told him you gave me food," she said. "Even when you did not know if I had my own." He understood then. Ethan felt a small warmth in his chest, not pride, but a simple sense of understanding. Something that connected two completely different worlds for a moment. When they reached the ridge, the cedar tree towered above them, its branches wide and strong. The shadow beneath it was cool and deep, offering rest after the long ride. Tassa slowed her horse and dismounted, Ethan did the same. She walked to the tree, placing her hand gently against its bark, almost like greeting an old friend. "This is where the safe path begins," she said quietly. "My people come this way often." Ethan nodded. "Then this is where we part." Tassa turned toward him. There was something in her eyes, something calm, thoughtful, and grateful. "You did not have to ride with me," she said. "I wanted to make sure you were safe," Ethan replied. "And your uncle asked." Tassa smiled softly. "I am glad he asked." She reached into the small pouch at her waist and pulled out a simple string of beads, no bright colors, no decoration, just small stones smoothed by hand. She held it out to Ethan. "This is for you," she said. "Not for payment. A sign that you are trusted." Ethan hesitated. "I don't want to take something important." "You should," Tassa said. "It means you ride with respect." Ethan slowly accepted it. The beads felt warm in his hand. As Tassa mounted her horse again, she looked at him with a quiet promise in her eyes. "We will meet again," she said softly. Ethan didn't know what made her say it, but he believed her. As she rode down the safe path, her figure slowly grew smaller against the landscape. But Ethan felt that something had changed. Something small, yet important. And though he didn't know it yet, this small ride together was only the beginning of what was coming. Ethan watched Tassa ride down the safe trail until she became a small figure among the trees. The wind rustled lightly through the big cedar beside him, making its branches sway like it was whispering something ancient. He stayed there a moment, holding the small beaded string she had given him. It felt simple, yet important. He didn't understand every meaning behind it, but he understood enough. It was a symbol of trust. Something not offered lightly. After a few quiet minutes, Ethan mounted his horse and began the slow ride back toward his cabin. He didn't rush. His mind kept circling the morning's events, the riders appearing at his home, the way Tassa spoke of trust, the ride they shared. It all stayed in his thoughts. He wasn't used to such deep moments. Life on the ranch was normally simple. Mend fences, check cattle, fix the roof when the wind peeled off shingles. But now something new lingered inside him, something he didn't quite know how to name. As he approached the valley where his cabin rested, Ethan noticed something surprising. The Apache riders were still there, waiting not in a circle this time, but gathered calmly near the base of a hill. When they saw him, they straightened with quiet respect. They hadn't left yet, and he suspected it wasn't because they doubted him. It was because they wanted to see Tassa reach safety from a distance. The uncle rode forward as Ethan approached. His expression was steady, but there was relief in his eyes. "You rode with her," the uncle said. "I did," Ethan replied. "She should reach her people soon." The uncle nodded thoughtfully. "She will." Ethan held out the reins loosely, staying relaxed. "If there's anything else you need," he said calmly, "you only have to say." The uncle observed him for a moment, then bowed his head slightly. Not deeply, just enough to show respect. "You have done enough." The riders gathered behind him, ready to return to their own lands. Before the uncle turned away, he looked at Ethan one more time. "Tassa does not forget kindness," he said, "and neither do we." With that, the group moved as one, guiding their horses across the valley. They did not rush. They left with the same calm dignity they had arrived with. Their silhouettes faded among the distant hills, the dust rising softly behind them like a thin veil. When Ethan finally stood alone again, the silence of the valley felt different, less empty, more thoughtful. He returned to his cabin, fed his horse, swept dust off the porch, and tried to resume the rhythm of an ordinary day. But nothing that afternoon felt ordinary. Every small sound, the wind, the creaking boards, the rustling grass, made him think of the ride with Tassa. He wondered if she had already reached her people safely. He wondered if her uncle had eased his worry. He wondered why the memory of her soft smile at the cedar tree stayed so strong in his mind. By evening, the sky melted into warm colors. Ethan sat with a tin cup of water on the porch, staring at the horizon. He didn't expect anything to happen, but life, he realized, had been full of small surprises lately. Just before sunset, He heard footsteps approaching. Not hurried. Not heavy. Just soft, steady steps on dirt. Ethan stood from his chair. And there she was. Tassa walked toward him from the lower path, her steps light and silent as always. Ethan blinked, surprised. She had left him hours ago. Far from here. For her to return already meant she had taken a long, fast route back. "Tassa?" he asked softly. She stopped a few feet from the porch, catching her breath lightly. "You are wondering why I returned." "I am," Ethan admitted. She held her hands clasped in front of her, her expression calm but holding a quiet determination. "I told my uncle I needed to speak with you again. He wanted me to rest first. But I chose to come here." Ethan nodded slowly. "Is everything all right?" "Yes," she said. "More than all right. I came because I felt something on the path today. Something I did not expect." Ethan didn't interrupt. He waited patiently, giving her all the space she needed. Tassa looked toward the ridge where they had shared their ride. "When we rode together, it felt easy. Safe. Like the land was quieter around us." Ethan listened carefully. He felt something similar but hadn't known how to put it into words. Tassa continued. "I travel alone often. Too often, my uncle says. I see many faces. Some afraid. Some unkind. Some curious. But yours was different." "How so?" Ethan asked gently. "Your face was calm when you saw me," she said. "You did not step back or judge. You just offered help. When someone has lived with caution for a long time, they notice small things. I noticed you." Her words were soft, but they landed deeply. Ethan looked down briefly, unsure how to respond. "I only did what felt right. That is why I returned," she said quietly. "People who do what is right without thinking of themselves, they are rare." She stepped closer, not too near, but closer than before. Her voice softened further. "I wanted to speak to you without my people watching. Without anyone else listening. Just us." Ethan's heart warmed, even though his breath stayed calm. "I'm glad you came," he said honestly. The sky was turning deeper shades of orange and blue behind her. Tassa looked at his cabin. The simple porch. The few tools leaned against the wall. "You live alone," she said. "I do," Ethan replied. "It is peaceful here." "It is," he said. "Sometimes too quiet." Tassa looked at him carefully, her eyes filled with thought. "You said we will meet again." You said it first," Ethan corrected gently. A soft smile touched her lips. "Yes, I did." They stood in the growing dusk, the breeze carrying the faint smell of pine and warm earth. Neither of them forced the moment. It simply existed, soft and natural. After a while, Tassa spoke again. "My uncle will not like that I returned so soon. But he understands my choices. He knows I follow where my heart guides." Ethan tilted his head slightly. "And where is it guiding now?" Tassa did not look away. "Here." Those words came calmly, without drama, without hesitation. They were simple and honest. Ethan felt a quiet shift inside him. Not sudden, not overwhelming, more like something new settling gently into place. Tassa looked around the valley, then back at him. "I will stay only a short while. I must return before the moon rises high. But I wanted to see you again. I wanted you to know that your kindness did more than fix my wagon." Ethan nodded with slow understanding. "I'm glad it helped." She hesitated, as if choosing her next words carefully. "You carry the beads I gave you?" Ethan lifted the small string in his palm. "Right here." "Right here." Tassa's expression warmed at the sight of it. "Then you carry my trust." She stepped onto the porch but stopped at a respectful distance. She wasn't invading his space, she was sharing it. For a moment, neither spoke. The day's heat faded into a cool breeze. The sky darkened to deep blue. A single star appeared between the clouds. Tassa finally whispered, "I do not know what comes next. But I feel we were meant to meet again. More than once." Ethan believed her. Something between them felt natural, unforced, and strangely steady for two people from different worlds. "I think so too," he said softly. Tassa gave a small nod of gratitude. Then she stepped back down from the porch. "I must return before the night grows thick," she said. "But I will come again. When the land feels right." Ethan watched as she walked back down the path, her silhouette moving like a shadow woven with moonlight. She didn't disappear quickly. Instead, she kept turning back once in a while, as if making sure he was still standing there. He was. She lifted her hand in a quiet gesture before fading into the dusk. Ethan stood long after she was gone, the beads warm in his hand, the valley filled with the memory of her presence. Whatever was forming between them was still small, still young, but it was real, and neither of them knew it yet. But this connection would grow into something that would soon change both of their paths. Over the next few days, Ethan found himself looking toward the lower trail more often than he cared to admit. He told himself he was only checking for stray cattle or watching the weather, but deep inside he knew he was hoping to see Tassa again. Something about her visit at dusk had changed the rhythm of his quiet life. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't loud, it was something gentle. Something that tugged at him in a way he couldn't explain. He went about his chores as usual, mending a broken fence rail, hauling water from the creek, repairing a loose roof plank, but every time he paused to wipe sweat from his brow, he found his eyes drifting toward the horizon. The cabin felt different now. The silence felt lighter, as if something in the air waited for a new sound. On the third morning, as he stepped out with a cup of coffee, he noticed movement at the edge of the valley. At first he thought it was a deer or wandering horse. But as the figure came closer, he felt his breath ease in a familiar way. It was Tassa. She wasn't riding this time. She was walking, her steps slow and steady, her braid swinging gently behind her. She carried a small cloth bundle and a calm expression, one that made Ethan feel like her arrival was both unexpected and completely natural. She reached the porch, stopping at the same respectful distance she always kept. Ethan didn't wait for her to speak. "It's good to see you," he said softly. "It is good to be seen," she replied with a light smile. "May I sit?" "Of course," Ethan said, moving aside so she could step onto the porch. She settled on the wooden steps, placing the small cloth bundle beside her. For a moment they sat quietly, listening to the wind move through the grass. It wasn't uncomfortable. It felt like two people who understood that silence could speak just as clearly as words. After a little while, Tassa opened the cloth bundle, revealing pieces of dried fruit, a few warm flatbreads, and something that looked like sweetened corn. She gestured for Ethan to take some. "I brought this for you," she said. "My aunt made the bread this morning." Ethan accepted gratefully. "Thank you. It smells good." Ethan accepted gratefully. Tassa took a piece for herself. "I told my aunt that I met someone who helped me. She said I should share food with you. It is her way of showing thanks." Ethan smiled gently. "Then tell her I'm grateful." They ate quietly for a while. Birds chirped near the fence. The morning sun settled over the valley like a warm blanket. When the food was gone, Tassa folded the cloth again and set it aside. She clasped her hands together on her knees. "I came today because I wanted to speak with you again. And because my uncle wished to talk with you also." Ethan tilted his head. "Your uncle? Is he waiting nearby?" "He is coming," Tassa said. "He will arrive soon. He wanted to speak to you face to face again, this time with calm." Ethan nodded slowly. "Then I'll wait here." Tassa seemed relieved. "Thank you." They didn't speak again for a long moment. Ethan sensed she had something quiet on her mind. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than before. "Ethan, these past days, I have felt something in me change. I don't know the word for it." Ethan listened carefully. "Take your time." Tassa looked out across the valley, watching the wind ripple through the grass. "I spend most of my life traveling, walking trails, collecting herbs, visiting places where the land changes with the seasons. I do not fear the world, but I do not trust it easily. My uncle says my heart is strong but closed. Ethan didn't interrupt. He could tell this was something she didn't say often. When I met you, she continued, something felt open. Something felt easier. She paused, then looked at him softly. I did not expect that. Ethan felt a quiet warmth spread through him. Not loud. Not wild, just steady. I didn't expect you to return, he said gently. But I'm glad you did. Tassa lowered her gaze briefly, almost shy. I returned because I wanted to understand why I felt safe. Why I felt calm near you. Ethan took a slow breath. Maybe sometimes two people just understand each other, even if they come from different worlds. Tassa looked up again, her eyes thoughtful. Yes, that is what I feel. Before Ethan could respond, the sound of hooves reached them. Tassa turned, and Ethan followed her gaze. Her uncle approached with 2 riders beside him, not in a circle this time, just calmly, like neighbors visiting. When they reached the cabin, the uncle dismounted with ease and stepped forward. He greeted Ethan with a respectful nod. You welcomed my niece, the uncle said. You shared food with her. You gave her safety on the trail. For these things, I thank you again. You don't have to thank me, Ethan replied. But the uncle raised his hand gently. I must, he said. Because it matters. The uncle looked at Tassa, then at Ethan. My niece tells me she has visited you 2 times. She tells me she came by her own choice. Not because she was lost or unsafe. That's true, Ethan replied. The uncle studied Ethan carefully, not as a judge, but as a guardian trying to understand something important. I am responsible for her. I must ask you something. I must ask you something. Ethan nodded. Ask anything. The uncle folded his arms. Do you mean her harm? No, Ethan answered immediately. Do you want something from her? No, Ethan said again. Just her company, nothing more. The uncle breathed out slowly, almost relieved. Then he looked at Tassa. And you? Tassa? Do you feel safe here? Yes, she said clearly. I feel safe. The uncle nodded once. Then I cannot stand in your way. Tassa's eyes softened at her uncle's words. Ethan sensed that this moment carried more meaning than he fully understood. It wasn't just permission. It was acceptance. The uncle stepped closer to Ethan. My people do not forget kindness. And we do not ignore it when someone shows respect to us. You have shown your heart. I see it now. Ethan met his gaze without fear. I meant every action sincerely. The uncle nodded slowly. Then I trust my niece to visit you, to speak with you, to walk this place freely. Tassa looked grateful. Ethan could tell she had worried about this conversation. The uncle added, as long as she returns before dark. Tassa smiled softly. Ethan couldn't help but smile too. After a brief exchange of respectful words, the uncle and the riders turned their horses and left the valley in a calm, natural way. Their presence faded into the distance, leaving the air still and peaceful once again. When they were gone, Tassa looked at Ethan with a mix of relief and warmth. My uncle trusts you now. I'm glad, Ethan said. I wouldn't want him to think poorly of me. Tassa stepped closer, her hands lightly clasped in front of her. He sees what I see. Ethan felt his heart settle into something steady and warm. And what do you see, Tassa? She hesitated only a moment, then spoke softly. A man who listens. A man who sees without judging. A man who makes the quiet feel safe. Ethan felt the words land gently in his chest. I see something in you too, he said. Tassa lifted her eyes. What do you see? A brave woman, Ethan said. Someone kind. Someone honest. Someone who walks the world with strength. Tassa held his gaze, and in that long, still moment, something passed between them that didn't need to be named. Not a promise, not a vow. Something simpler. Something real. She stepped onto the porch beside him, close enough that he could hear her breathe. I will return again, she whispered. Not because I must, but because I want to. Ethan nodded. I'll be here. Tassa turned to leave, But before she stepped fully off the porch, she paused. She reached out gently and placed her hand on his arm, not tightly, just a brief touch. Warm and calm. Then she stepped back. She walked down the trail with steady steps, her braid swaying gently behind her. But this time, Ethan didn't watch with worry or wonder. He watched with the calm understanding that something new had begun, not fast, not dramatic, but quietly and honestly. As she disappeared into the soft glow of the afternoon light, Ethan looked down at the small string of beads in his hand. It was warm again,